It was cold, so seemingly impossibly cold that the very earth seemed to tremble with it. Cold and dark, dark despite the silvery beams of moonlight and twinkling stars peeking behind the thin clouds overhead. Cold and dark and white, that damnable color that had brought down about the cold and darkness. The white covered nearly everything in sight, from the frosty ground to the evergreens that stood tall and proud as they reached high up into the sky. A lone figure stepped carefully through the thick layers of snow, her shoes long since soaked by the ice particles that clung there. Had anyone been there to see her, though much to her dismay, she was completely alone, they would have immediately noticed that she was exceedingly underdressed for this unforgiving climate. Her dress, though lovely to the eyes, was thin and not at all protective, her shoulders bare, save for the shawl that was wrapped around her shoulders. But the hand-knitted fabric did little to help her either. Her shoes were no better than slippers, the tea heels being better suited for the summer months and immensely difficult to walk in. She had considered on more than one occasion to simply take them off, but the fishnet stockings hidden behind her skirt would offer no reprieve. She had been so happy to receive such fine clothing only hours before, but now she cursed them with all her might as she forced her way forward. It was strange now how three things that had once seemed so simple could turn fatal in the blink of an eye, ready to overtake any who dare brave their practically barren wasteland and deliver them into the waiting arms of death. Death waited her on that night as she trekked through the snow, waited as the cold seeped into her skin and chilled her right down to the bone until the very blood that flowed through her veins seemed to freeze. Waited as her footfalls became heavy and sluggish, like a chore she was putting off until the very last second. Waited as her breaths became uneven and sporadic, easily visible in the night air. Waited as her chilled skin began to turn blue and she could no longer feel the tips of her fingers or toes. Waited as she began to feel dizzy and lightheaded, sleep trying to be the first to calm her. She did not know death was waiting for her, but she would soon find out. It was hard to focus. No matter how many times she tried to shake herself awake or remind herself where she needed to go, her mind simply refused to lift the blanket of haze that had fallen over it, and her destination was lost amidst the fog. She was practically delirious as she stumbled a bit, wondering what she was doing outside in weather such as this. Surely she should be inside, curled up near a warm fire or soaking in a hot bath, protected from the winds that tried to push her back and the cold that left her unable to stop shivering as her teeth rattled so much that her jaw ached with the action. The thought of turning around and heading back to where she came from had her nearly doing that. But something in the back of her mind told her that she couldn't, that there was nothing left to go back to. That left her confused. There was always something to go back to. Someone wise had told her that, but she could not remember their name or face. The image of them blurred as her mind felt. She could no longer dwell on that blurred image as she staggered once again, her vision starting to fail her as her body became so heavy that she was not sure how she was still standing upright. She was not even sure if she was standing anymore, the world starting to spin around her. Even through the spinning haze, she was able to find her footing, but it came a moment too late. She stood upright for but a second before she found herself tumbling off the path she had been walking, the ground sloping down into a hill she had not even known was there. Her world was a mess of unidentifiable shapes as she continued to roll down the hill, unable to stop herself or realize she was about to collide with the trunk of a tree until her head came into contact with it. Darkness took her then. A small mercy she was allowed from the bitter cold and the pain she felt all over. But it was not to last. She was not sure how long she had been out, but she woke to her face pressed against something rough and wet. With what little strength she had left, she pushed herself away from the trunk, too tired and confused to wonder why there was a streak of red where her head had been resting, or why she could not seem to open her right eye. The bump to her head was just that, and nothing to be concerned about. But the small sliver of blood that trailed from it was enough to blind her. Rolling onto her back, she looked up at the underside of the branches of the evergreen she lay underneath. The dark green of its pines, a stark contrast to the white and dark blue around it. It was there that she saw it. The hooded figure that mankind had feared since the dawn of time, sitting on a thick branch, long legs dangling beneath it as it watched her. She could not see the face it wore at first, but a slight lift of its head revealed one, that would have left her glaring at it if she could have moved her face. The malice in her eyes was enough to let the figure know that the face was unwelcomed. So it morphed into something new, one that would surely give her comfort in this time. A sadness came over her then, tears forming in her eyes that froze against her skin as soon as they were released. One last time, the face changed, and her tears turned to those of joy, a weak smile pulling at her lips. She thought she was lifting her arms up, trying to extend her hand toward the thing on the branch, but she did not seem to realize that her arm was a dead weight beside her. The last of her energy was gone and spent. Though she could not move her limbs, her lips still seemed to work. A song rising up to that thing that had come for her, but not for the reason she thought. The figure tilted their head at the delirious woman beneath them as the melody reached their ears before they descended from the branch through the air, landing noiselessly and gracefully but a few feet away. Her eyes followed them all the way, her head lolling to the side and bouncing slightly, like she had no bones to support her. She continued to sing as they reached her, the song bittersweet due to the dryness of her throat. They stood over her now, looking down at her curiously, letting her go on until the song was done. She tried to whisper a name as they leaned down towards her, but it died on her lip as soon as they touched her. Her numb skin unable to feel fingers touch her bare shoulder, her shawl lying forgotten and buried in the snow on the hill above them. The smile faded from her lips as the world around her did the same. Her teeth no longer clattered, and no more did she shiver against the cold. She cried no more tears that froze as soon as they were shed. Her breath was no longer uneven or sporadic, the long wisps of expelled air that passed her lips ceasing to continue. Even her heartbeat, already slow as it was, beat one last final time against her ribcage before the blood stopped pumping through her veins. Death had come for her that night. Death had taken her.